When we are in pain and suffering, we want to find relief, a way out. Here's the thing. For as counterintuitive as it may feel, what we really need to find is a way into our psychological pain. The more we try to escape the pain, the worse we make it. We are not allowing ourselves to move through the grief, loss, fear, and whatever else it is that needs to be processed and integrated into our nervous system. I love this because this kind of says it all. It's like we're always trying to look for a way out of our pain. And what we really need to do is to get safe enough in our bodies to be able to lean into our pain. In order to move past our pain, we have to move through it. There's really no other way to get there.
Hi guys, welcome back to Authentic Talks. I'm really excited that you guys are joining me this week, and we do have a great show for you with an amazing guest. But before we move on to the show, I want to talk with you about the coronavirus. I went to the market and the shelves were cleared. And I realized that there is an energy where people are like afraid. And I sensed that there was like a lot of rudeness. I had heard about fights breaking out. And I just want to take a moment and just say, calm down, you guys. And I understand that like we've never had it where the NBA has canceled games and where schools were closing because of it, because of something like this. So I totally get it. And I'm asking everyone to please take a step back and do things to kind of raise your vibration and be in tune with yourself and just making sure that you're following the cleanliness guidelines and being safe for your families and for yourself. But try not to get overworked where you create anxiety that you've never had before, or where you are causing the auto accident or the cause of the fight that breaks out in the store over a box of macaroni and cheese. So I'm just asking that everyone just be safe out there. And I know there's many jobs that are now going to work from home. There's places like colleges closing down. So I understand that it is something that is serious, but it's all about the way that we process this information and the way that we react to it that can make all the difference in the world. So do what you need to do to make sure that you're safe and that your environment is clean. And let's not lose our basic principles of respecting our neighbors and each other. So that's all I'll say about the coronavirus. And we're going to move forward with getting the show on the road because, as I stated, we do have an amazing guest. This podcast is all about authentic conversations. It's all about growth, love, respect, success, mind, body, and spirit. If you're looking to grow and expand in your life and become your authentic self, this is the podcast for you. Our guest this week is a certified professional coach through the Growth Training Institute, and she holds a master's degree in both mental health counseling and exercise psychology. She is also a Somatic Experiencing practitioner, and she completed a 3-year training with the Somatic Experiencing Institute, founded by trauma therapy pioneer Peter Levine. You guys, I'm really excited to bring to you author Ilene Smith, who wrote the book Moving Beyond Trauma: The Roadmap to Healing from Your Past and Living with Ease and Vitality. Please welcome Eileen to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm really excited to be able to have this conversation with you.
I am really excited to have you. I want to talk about your book. You have a book called Moving Beyond Trauma. And before we dive into the book, can you share with our audience what motivated you or inspired you to write this book?
Oh, absolutely. God, that can take a whole hour just for me to tell you, but I'll try to keep it short. So I went back to school for a master's in mental health counseling in my early 40s. And when I was doing my internship at an eating disorder clinic, I was noticing, it was the first time in my life that I had ever been in a work environment where I actually felt really safe. And as I would, talk to my supervisor about this, I learned that many of the clinicians at the clinic were certified in something called Somatic Experiencing. And it's a therapeutic modality that basically brings the body into the healing process for trauma healing and to resolve your mental health issues. I didn't even know what I was getting myself into, but I went to the first training. They happened to have been doing a training in Phoenix, and I went to the training, and I had been in therapy myself since I was in my mid-20s. And this felt like it was the missing link. You know, as much as I had done so much of my own work and I had journeyed far and wide with therapists, so I still felt like there was, as much as I was managing all my issues, and I have a history of eating disorders and a lot of anxiety, I still felt like there was something, like my nervous system didn't feel regulated. And when I got to the somatic experiencing work, it sort of felt like it was the missing link, because it's very different than what we call top-down talk therapy, where you start with a cognitive process. Because the talking in somatic experiencing is really about bringing the body into the process. And, you know, we work with sensation, imagery, behavior, affect, and meaning in somatic experiencing. And the whole premise behind somatic experiencing is that trauma is not necessarily about an event, but it's about the energy that gets locked in your body around real or perceived threat. So if that's the case, wouldn't it make sense that we need to bring the body into the healing process? All this information was coming at me. So I actually started with as I was going through the training, two things happened. As a student of the work, I also became a patient of the work. And so I started seeing how effective it was and how much more regulated my own nervous system was. Mm-hmm. And then I started using all these techniques that I was learning throughout the trainings with my patients. And I could not believe the results I was getting. It was just quite fascinating to me. Hence, just fast forward several years later, I really feel like this is an important message about trauma and healing that I needed to get out to a larger audience, that we have to go beyond a cognitive process in order to fully integrate healing. So, and that was really the inspiration for the book. And I'm really kind of on this mission to reach as large of an audience as I can with this body of work.
I have the book here. I started reading the book and I absolutely love it. And
thank you.
This is the first time that I personally have heard of somatic.
Somatic. It is not an easy word, but here's the easy way to remember it. Soma means the body.
Somatic.
It means soma means the body. So somatic is the body. It's about bringing somatic experiencing to the process.
That's interesting. I love it. It's the first time I've heard of that. As I was reading about it, what went through my mind, one of the things that I was thinking about as I was reading the book was I had heard of this therapy where you go into like this freezing cold, like a chamber. Mm-hmm. Have you heard of that where it's really cold? I was like, okay, so that was new to me when I heard about that. Even though they're completely different, I was just thinking about how our bodies, how we are, with our bodies and how we operate. For some reason, I thought about that when I was thinking about, as I was reading.
Well, and it makes perfect sense that you would, because cryotherapy, or like ice plunging, was really developed by a guy named Wim Hof. And he actually basically has made it really clear through research that he's done that we can actually like biohack our autonomic nervous system. And so that's what the cryotherapy is all about. It's a hack to your nervous system. And somatic experiencing, I wouldn't say it's a hack to your nervous system, but it is a way to actually start creating more homeostasis in your nervous system. And anytime we're bringing the body into the process in any way, whether it's some sort of movement or that kind of cold therapy, or they're all ways to start to try to release energy from the body. And so like the foundation of somatic experiencing, it was developed by a man named Peter Levine. And Dr. Levine had studied, he was trying to figure out this one thing. How come animals in the wild do not get traumatized? And how come people and human beings and domestic animals do get traumatized? And what he ultimately figured out through lots of observation was that animals in the wild have an innate capacity to shake off their trauma. They know how to automatically reset their nervous systems when they've been under threat. And we as humans actually do too, but I think we've had a lot of different things happen along the way as far as evolution that doesn't allow us to. For example, let's say you get into an accident and the paramedics come and you're at the scene of the accident and they're trying to help you. What's the first thing they tell you? They tell you not to move.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Right. But our bodies, but think about like when you're anxious, okay, think about how your body naturally wants to move, or if something's uncomfortable, right? We try to shake or move our bodies, or we try to expel that energy through heat, shaking, and tears. That's a natural biological completion. So animals in the wild are doing that all the time after they've experienced something that's been potentially of threat. And we as humans are not, I don't think we're just given that space to do that anymore. So we're kind of relearning this innate abilities that we have to release the traumas from our bodies.
It's very interesting. You know what happened to me? I was in an auto accident where someone had hit me from behind. And although you go through your mind of all the things that you're going to do if that ever happens to you, all of that stuff goes right out the window. I got out of the vehicle. I had this limp, but I felt something was jolted, but I still tried to move anyway. And I think we couldn't move because we were just being constantly jolted. It was her, the third car, on her gas, and the guy's bumper was under mine. And I went through that feeling of like that freak out moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to go through physical therapy and go through quite a bit just to get my neck to hold up on its own. I feel like I really went through a serious form of trauma and I still have issues. And so that's why this is really interesting to me, because I think that a lot of people definitely can use it. And I think it's helpful in so many different ways. Moving beyond trauma, it's the healing from your past and living with ease, whether it's an automobile accident or something that's happened in your past, like that was of whatever other type of experience.
Yeah. Well, there's so much that you're saying there that I want to respond to.
Go for it.
So the first thing is that from what you're telling me, it sounds like, yes, you were left with that trauma imprint from the accident. And let's start with the first thing that happened. You know, if trauma is about that energy that gets locked in your body around real or perceived threat, you don't have time for self-defense. Think about, so you have an incomplete biological experience in your body. So that gets held in there. So, and there are ways to work through that a somatic experiencing therapist would help you work through that. But the big thing ultimately would be that the therapist would set things up to help you move through that experience in a way that you felt some sense of mastery. Like, so that the setup would be about helping you build a safe container within yourself, and then going through the accident in a way that you felt confident. And this is exactly why, you know, I wrote the book, was because we're so misinformed as a society about trauma and how to resolve it. And I think a lot of people don't quite understand, like, yes, trauma can be an acute experience like the one you had, or trauma can be a series of chronic stressors in your life. To the degree that an experience becomes traumatic for you has everything to do with how resilient you are and how many other previous traumas you had where you came out the other side feeling safe. So there's so many elements that I can talk about here. But I think the big thing to remember is that that energy does get locked in your body, and it will play havoc on your mind. It will show up at different points in your life when you might not be expecting it. And a lot of times it robs us of, depends to what degree that you're experiencing the trauma. It really does rob us of a sense of freedom and fluidity in our life.
Yeah, that's so true. So if someone has gone through something traumatic as like a child, would this be something that would be able to help them?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So the first thing, that I like to explain to people is that I think that we're very misinformed about, we think about PTSD as a specific event, but there's something called complex PTSD, and complex PTSD is what happens generally. It generally starts in childhood or, in a long-term relationship, but it's one stressor after another. And when we've had complex PTSD, which is often, starts in childhood, we're often left becoming adults that have really disconnected from ourselves because that we had to survive. So like if you've had complex PTSD, your whole system is just living in one survival, everything is about a survival experience. And those survival states of fight, flight, or freeze, those are only meant for acute situations to help us survive. But think about if you're constantly under threat and don't feel safe as a child, those mechanisms never get turned off. When you have complex PTSD, it really can impact you as an adult. There was these studies done called the ACE studies, which ACE stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. And it's a series of 10 questions. And the higher a person scores on the adverse childhood experiences, the more mental health issues and more physical and emotional issues they tend to have as adults. So
Wow.
that's pretty telling, right? That goes into the whole thing, and that's complex PTSD.
Interesting, to say the
least.
least.
It's pretty fascinating.
It is.
In the book, I talk about all this, and I also talk about the importance of creating a healing lifestyle and being able to, we have to start working to bring the nervous system into balance, because all the cognitive work is great and it's important to have insight into your issues and understand, the origins of what's causing your behaviors today, to look at the patterning. That's all important. Insight is so important. But if we just stay in our heads and we don't have any space to get safely back into the bodies that we've detached from or disconnected from, then we can't really have a complete healing cycle.
That's good stuff to know.
Yeah.
I noticed that in the book that there was an assessment. Is that assessment set up to help people understand like where they are in their, what is the assessment about?
There's 6 assessments in the book. And the first one, the one that you saw, was that the first one that is in one of the earlier chapters is called the trauma sensitivity assessment. And what that is an assessment to help you see how your past is impacting your behaviors today. I'm not looking to measure like how traumatized you are, because trauma is really an individual thing, right? Because like 10 people could experience the same situation and have 10 different responses and reactions to it.
That's so true.
Yeah. Well, that's, if you go back to what I said earlier about the definition of trauma being about that energy that gets locked in your body, right? Every body is different. So in the trauma sensitivity assessment, what we're just looking at is what your behaviors look like today. Like, how is your past, whatever that past trauma is, how is it impacting your behaviors today? And I think one of the things that I find so fascinating when people do the trauma sensitivity assessment is that there's like, oh, I didn't even realize that behavior had anything to do with something unresolved from my past. So it starts giving you a different perspective of your behaviors. Rather than asking why, we start looking at what's happening. So, right, because in talk therapy, all we do is ask why. So now we're trying to be with the experience, because in order to start healing, we have to be with our experiences. And that's the only way we can be present, right? If we're not with our experiences, it means we're not present. And often when we go into the why of something, that takes us away from what's happening in the here and now. I always believe that the why is a big distraction from the why. I've got, in the book, there's 6 assessments. So the first one is that trauma sensitivity assessment. And then the other 5 assessments are just different elements of how your nervous system is functioning. So what the assessments ultimately do is they allow a person to have total perspective and to clearly see a roadmap of how their nervous system is functioning. So like one of the assessments is to show you if you're fight, flight, or freeze dominant. And so, because we all have tendencies, so we bring awareness to these things, and then we can start observing them as they're beginning to happen. So we can start slowing down the nervous system, and the more we can slow it down and name what's happening, the more capacity we have for that observation piece, and the more capacity we start developing to be present. And presence is where we can balance our nervous system.
I love it. I absolutely
Thank you.
love it. I love it so much because it allows us to be able to deal with certain things. I love anything that helps us to be able to move forward.
Yeah.
Anything that can help people to move forward is amazing to me. And I love the fact that you're able to identify which trait you have. Are you...
Oh, so fight, flight, there's one of the scales is to help you see whether you're fight, flight, or freeze. Because when fight and flight doesn't work, our bodies shut down and go into freeze. Like we've all heard the expression, a deer in headlights. Think about that. Deer is running. Okay, then it knows it's about to get hit by the car. And what it does is it knows that fight or flight's not going to work anymore. So it totally shuts down its body. So it's not going to feel the pain of death. So some people, like, and especially you see this a lot with people that have had complex PTSD, you see that they're totally shut down. And they're often, a lot of times people think, oh, that person's just so mellow. Well, that person is just totally checked out. They're not really mellow. They're just living in a state of freeze because that was the only way they were going to survive their childhood.
How would you know the difference? Or is that something the person would have to identify for themselves?
How would I, as a clinician, know if someone was in a freeze, or how would they know?
Both.
Most of the time when people are in that state, a couple of things that I would notice as a clinician, and they would describe it this way, is that they feel very numb. They don't feel, they can't access their feelings, and they often have a hard time articulating their experiences. And they generally don't feel very connected to other people. So those things would all indicate to me that the person was in a freeze. And there's other things I might see. They might have a really hard time orienting to being in the present.
If someone is like that, does that mean it's unsafe to be around a person who is so disconnected from their feelings and numb? Let's say if this person was trying to function in society, let's say if we encountered that and we knew that this person was disconnected from their feelings, does that mean that's someone that you would want to avoid?
If you're asking me the question as a clinician, I would say, there's work. I have to work to get that person out of that freeze state. And that takes building a lot of trust. Is that person unsafe to other people? Absolutely not. We see people that are living in that state all day long. I'm just highly aware of it because of the work that I do. You might, as a lay person, just look at that other person and think, oh, maybe they're totally chill. Maybe they're just hard to connect with. Maybe I have nothing to say to them. They're not very conversational. Or maybe they're like really good at faking it and pretending that they're engaged. It just can show up a million different ways. But if that dissociation is there, that person would describe themselves as not feeling really connected to themselves or people around them.
Oh, got it. So it's not like we all have to run for shelter or anything.
No. It's not like you're dealing with, this isn't like psychopath behavior or something like that. No, it's just that person is, the easiest way for me to say it is that they just don't appear connected, or they appear to be overly relaxed, but generally it's just because they're numbed out.
Oh, okay. Because I know most people describe me as kind of being laid back, and my dad's laid back. And I always thought I have my personality traits from him because my mother was quite the opposite. But I'm not disconnected.
You don't seem disconnected. I don't think we'd be having this conversation if you were disconnected.
Yeah.
For sure not. I think you're actually have a lot of awareness. Even to be having this conversation takes a lot of awareness.
Yeah.
So, but you might just be, I don't know your background or what it was like growing up for you, but you might have had just really solid parents. And if you had a solid upbringing,
it's not that. No. It's not that at all. I have, my dad is amazing. I think that's just who I am. I don't know how I
It could
became that.
just be your nervous system sometimes people are just born in with really regulated and really resilient nervous systems, and you might just be one of those people, and lucky for you. It's been a massive amount of work for me to get my nervous system regulated. I grew up in a very chaotic house. And so my nervous system didn't like it. I wound up at a pretty, I'd say my eating disorder behaviors started probably in my mid to late teens. And by the time I was in college, it was full-blown eating disorder. And then I spent the next many years trying to resolve my eating disorder behaviors. I was an over-exerciser. I was a competitive athlete. So it all looked okay, but I really struggled and spent many years in therapy. And when I got to this work, it's just totally changed my life. My nervous system, I'm really aware when I'm going off balance, and I do things every day to set things up for myself so that I'm living what I call a healing lifestyle. A healing lifestyle is really about being your body and mind being in connection as best you possibly can on a day-to-day basis.
I think what happens is that it shows up differently in different people.
Totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so I may not have had an eating disorder, but it may have impacted me in other ways, where for me, I think that I had an issue growing up with mine showed up as an inability to trust and feel safe with people.
Yeah. And that's
Yeah,
the attachment pieces. And so without getting into all the nitty gritty of it, when a lot of times attachments is a whole other conversation. We could have a whole other hour about attachment issues. On some level, as children, if we don't fully feel safe in connection with our primary caregiver, we tend to give up a piece of the relationship we're having with ourselves in order to be in relationship with our primary caregivers. And so we take that into our adult relationship. So it might be that we don't fully trust. In my life, my mom was not predictable. Like I never knew I'd come home from school if she was there. And I didn't know if she was going to be in a good mood or a bad mood. So for me, I never felt safe when I walked in the door. And that impacted how I behaved in my adult relationships. It took me a long time until I got safe enough within myself. I couldn't really be safe in another relationship.
I think that I experienced that. And I never knew what to expect when I got home either. I never knew if it was going to be the day that we were being evicted again.
Oh,
Or
wow.
or if it was the day that she would be bruised up, black eye, no teeth, whatever, because she had a boyfriend that would beat her.
Oh my God.
And so, yeah, it was very it was
Traumatic.
hard.
That is traumatic.
Yeah, horrible,
Yeah.
traumatic.
I mean, it's not like you got to watch model behavior. So, hence that's what you're going out in the world thinking that this is what the world looked like.
Yeah. And so I had
Mhm.
a problem with trust, and she would select friends to be in her life that were constantly backstabbing, just doing things that was just
So they
crazy.
weren't safe. Your mom didn't really model what a safe, like you had no idea what safe relationship really looked like.
Exactly. So I went out into the world afraid because I didn't want to encounter those things. And I already had a mistrust. It took a lot for me to trust a person. And then whenever I finally did relax and get to a place where I was like, okay, not everybody is a horrible person.
Mm-hmm.
Then the person would surprise me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like caught me off guard that you're a horrible person, or that you're just you're thinking that I want to be promoted. So you want to go and block that when that's not even my motive. And you feel like you're threatened by something that I'm not even thinking about. And so then that set me back a little bit more. And so I had to go through quite a bit of work just to get to a place where I'm able to identify right away.
So your sense of what's safe and what's dangerous is way more accurate as you heal. Yeah. And
Yes.
that's what happens, because as we heal and we get safer in our own systems, we're more in tune with, energetically with what's going on around us. So,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times when we have a lot of unresolved trauma, we either wind up being overly trusting or not trusting enough. And when that healing piece comes into place, we're just like, our radar is just so much better.
Which leads me to our next topic.
I talk about what healing looks like. And I think what I talk about in there is about the importance of how we have to bring the body into the healing process. And it's really about, I believe that healing has to happen really slowly. I think a lot of times when we live in a society where we're always trying to, we want a quick fix. And a quick fix generally leaves us back where we started. And so in healing, we have to go slow. We have to build healing slowly and gently. And I think it's real. And because when there is so much disconnection from the body, or not accurate connection to the body, if we do it too fast, we're not going to safely help a person build the body as a safe container. Because everything in building and what healing looks like is about creating a sense of safety for yourself internally and around you. So that's really the big idea of what healing looks like. And the thing is, it looks different for everybody. But what I know is that it's about finding entry points into your body in safe ways and finding entry points to help you start regulating your nervous system. I will tell you this, for example, like before I even got to the somatic work, every time I would go to a yoga class, I always knew I felt better after yoga. It makes perfect sense. Like, why do I always feel better after yoga? It's because breath work is a regulator for our nervous system. And between breath work and all of the movement, that gentle movement in our body, it helps us get connected to ourselves. And we all have to find different ways to create that safety. And because at the end of the day, healing is about regulating the nervous system.
I heard someone else say that yoga had made them feel that way too.
Yeah, yoga is amazing. It was one of those things I think that saved me. I mean, I started doing yoga in my 20s, and without even knowing, I just intuitively, it was always, even if it lasted, half an hour or an hour after the class, it was a thing that really helped ground me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I was thinking about taking a yoga class myself. This is a good book. You did some really good work here. And I had never really heard of this. So I think it's awesome. And I love that there's like healing exercises. I love whenever a book has a way for us to measure assessments where you're not just reading a book and just getting the information, but you're able to identify which one am I.
Right.
Absolutely just love it. I really do.
Well, thank you. I really, look, when I wrote the book, my goal was really to, on every level, I just wanted to make it so that people it was understandable, that people could pick up the book. They can say, oh my God, I so relate to what you're saying, and being able to lay the groundwork for them to find their own path to a healing lifestyle. Because it's really about, at the end of the day, it's about how connected we are to ourselves is how connected we're going to be able to be to other people and the world around us. And without that deep relationship to ourselves, we don't get to move through life with a full sense of joy and ease and vitality. And really, what at the end of the day, what is life about? Life is about living, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it definitely is. It's definitely not an easy path to take to decide you want to heal. And it's definitely not easy to connect to your body when you don't feel safe. But what I tell people, it's like, if you could just do 5 minutes a day of that healing work, like think about, I've actually calculated this, 5 minutes a day, 365 days a year adds up to 30 hours. So think about it, for a year, you took 5 minutes every day to do breath work, or to do some form of meditation, or to just dance freely and move your body and get connected to your body. Think about how much more connected you're going to be to yourself. 30 hours is a lot.
Yeah.
And that's how we start building resilience in our own system. So that, if you take that 5 minutes a day, Okay, maybe after a year, you're less reactive to situations. Maybe you're less reactive to something that would seem crisis-like today. A year later, you'd be like, oh yeah, I got this.
Mm-hmm.
Because when your nervous system is regulated, you can, you're just activated and you're not living in a cesspool of stress and stress hormones. So you get the emotional mental benefits of it, but you also get the physical benefits of creating more of the feel-good hormones such as oxytocin, dopamine, and serotonin. And those are all things that help us. Those are our feel-good hormones, right? Don't we want more of those and less of the stress hormones like cortisol? Because the stress hormones create inflammation in our bodies. And that's how we get disease. So if we go back to what we were talking about earlier about the ACE studies, the early adverse childhood experience studies. This is what's at the core of why there's more mental and physical issues in people that have had a lot of childhood stress.
I love it because
it makes sense, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a people thing. It's not about color. It's not about the sex, your orientation. It is a people thing.
I'd say it's a nervous system thing.
Yeah, nervous system thing.
And we all have a nervous system.
Absolutely. That makes it a people thing.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's really good stuff.
Oh,
I would definitely recommend to everyone to pick up this book. Now, when does the book come out?
So the book is out. The launch date is May 5th. I think pre-sales start April 27th. And so the book is available on Amazon. But if in the meantime, if anyone is interested in getting a sample chapter and getting updates on my books and my workshops, they can always go to my website, which is eileensmith.com. And Eileen is ILENE. Smith.com. And on there, you can also download a free ebook that I have that called It's Not Your Fault. And it's really about how we're impacted by our past and how we can start developing a healing lifestyle. So it's kind of like just a mini glimpse of what's in the book. But I am going to start, I think in the next couple of weeks, my team's going to set this up so that I can have a sample chapter to people that opt in and give me their email.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Pretty exciting. I mean, it's kind of cool to see people's response to the work. So I can't wait for the book to get out there to a larger audience.
Absolutely. It's definitely helpful. I love the fact that it can help someone who lives in any area. It doesn't matter. Because I speak with people sometimes who explain that they've had traumatic experiences based off of the neighborhood that they live in. Yeah, I spoke with someone that was sharing that. And so at this point, it's like it's all about everybody moving forward and trying to get over those hurdles. And so if this is something that would work, why not use it?
Yeah. And I think what the book is, it really is eye-opening for people to see that a lot of what they're experiencing is uncommon and that there is ways to create healing around the issues.
Absolutely. So what does a day in the life of Eileen look like at work?
Oh my God. Well, there's a lot of writing involved. There's the social media aspect. I'm really trying to build a platform to get this information out there. So, when I wrote the book, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. But, in
a good way or?
Well, I just knew that I wanted to get the information out there, but I tend to do this. I come up with an idea and then I figure out the logistics of it later, which is pretty much what's happening. I teach a somatic experiencing class once a week at the eating disorder clinic where all of this started for me. I'm thinking about launching an online class in the beginning of the year. So it's doing some development for that as well. Then there's, beginning to get speaking engagements and lectures. There's a lot of work to do. And I didn't mention this. Last year I did a research project on somatic experiencing and eating disorders. So process of getting that paper together and getting it published, we got phenomenal results. So that was pretty exciting. Yeah, it was really exciting.
When you talk about eating disorders, it's something that I haven't had the experience with that. I think mine is on the other end where I just love to eat.
Right.
And When there's an eating disorder, what is that about? Like you eat and then you just don't want to keep your food with you?
Well, there's several different kinds. There's different varieties of eating disorders. There's anorexia, bulimia, there's a combination of, and then there's also binge eating disorder. And binge eating disorder is now actually a diagnostic and statistic manual diagnosis. So it's in the last version of the big book of diagnosis that's in there too. And whether it's eating disorders or any form of addiction or anxiety or depression, all of these things are just maladaptive ways to dealing with things that are unresolved within our system. And I go back to, like, it doesn't matter what the issue is. At the end of the day, what the issue is that your nervous system is just trying to find a way to regulate its discomfort.
Wow.
So yeah. So I look at the, mental health issues, unless there's like real chemical issues like schizophrenia, most of it can be healed with regulating the nervous system and through talk therapy, a combination of what we call top down, which is talk therapy, and bottom up, which is the body. And incorporating all those things into the healing process is pretty powerful. I mean, you see this a lot now in treatment centers. They're starting to incorporate, body-based treatments into the process.
I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Going back to your online class that you're considering or that you're going to offer, what is that going to be about?
It's funny, I thought initially the course was going to be more of a trauma healing class, and it will be. But I think I'm beginning to think, I tend to work with a lot of mid to late 20s and 30-year-olds. And I really think that there's a need for a course that I want to call the transition to help young adults into adulthood. And so there would be things like self-care and boundaries versus barriers, relationship issues, attachments, and all about healing. So it would be kind of helping these young adults transition to being full-fledged healthy adults. So I'm thinking, I'm doing some market research now and seeing if that's the direction to go in. But it'll be based on all of the work around trauma healing. It'll just be packaged a little differently depending upon who my audience really is that we're marketing to.
I love it. Helping our next generation to be healthier and just on point a little more, When I was growing up, I always had this feeling like that people didn't really care about kids as much. And it's just really nice to see how life is evolving and how we're able to have a better understanding of how to deal with trauma, how to deal with all of the different mental illnesses that exist. I'm appreciative of it. I'm appreciative of you for writing your book and taking the time to really make a good piece. This is a good quality book.
Thank you. I really wanted it to be, as I said earlier, relatable so that people will pick it up and want to continue. Sometimes you start a book and 10 pages in, you're done with it. I really, really hope that I do engage people to read it, because I do think it's.
I feel that you absolutely will. Let me be the first, or maybe someone may have already told you. Let me be the first, one, as far as like being on a show, maybe to share with you that I put the explanation point behind it. That's like that seal of approval.
Oh, thank you so much. That's awesome. I love to hear that. Thank you. Listen, it's so nice to get good feedback and to know that I've got people excited about the work. The word trauma was such a stigmatized word for so long. And thank you, Oprah, for making the word trauma okay now. And so now it's a little bit of a buzzword. So I think the timing for this is really right as well.
Absolutely. If someone wanted to find you, how could they find you?
The best way, they can either go to my website, which is www.eilenesmith.com. You can also find me on Instagram under, I think it's Eileen, Ilene Smith Healing. Those are probably the two easiest ways to find me.
Well, Eileen, I love that you're passionate about helping others. What an explanation point.
Thank you so much. It was just truly an honor to speak with you and to be able to share this information today. And thank you for all the good questions you've asked. When we are in pain and suffering, we want to find relief, a way out. Here's the thing. For as counterintuitive as it may feel, what we really need to find is a way into our psychological pain. The more we try to escape the pain, the worse we make it. We are not allowing ourselves to move through the grief, loss, fear, and whatever else it is that needs to be processed and integrated into our nervous system. I love this because this kind of says it all. It's like we're always trying to look for a way out of our pain. And what we really need to do is to get safe enough in our bodies to be able to lean into our pain. We have to, in order to move past our pain, we have to move through it. There's really no other way to get there.
I love it.
Thank you.
Wow, you guys, pick up the book. Get that early. What was it again, Eileen? It's an early copy on.
So on my website, you can opt in, and there's two things. You'll get a free download for an ebook, but I'm also going to, in the next week or so, by March 15th, you'll be able to download a sample chapter of the book for free.
That is so awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eileen, for coming on the show. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
That was an amazing show. I really enjoyed speaking with Eileen. I thought that was great information and stuff that actually can help all of us, because I'm pretty sure that if you have never experienced trauma in your life, that you know someone who has. Again, Eileen's book is called Moving Beyond Trauma, The Roadmap to Healing from Your Past and Living with Ease. Ilene Smith, thank you so much for joining the Authentic Talks family. You were amazing, and I look forward to you coming back on the show and talking with us a little bit more. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and just riding with me every single week. I do appreciate it very much. You guys, we only have about 5 shows before we end our season, so 5 shows to go. The time went by really, really fast. And again, as I mentioned before, we're not going to have a very long hiatus because I actually really enjoy the podcast. I truly, truly enjoy it. All right, you guys, thank you very much for tuning in. I'm Shanta with Authentic Talks.
We're always trying to look for a way out of our pain. And what we really need to do is to get safe enough in our bodies to be able to lean into our pain. In order to move past our pain, we have to move through it. There's really no other way to get there.